Imagine finding out that you're not entirely human, not in a science fiction way, not in a metaphor, but literally, genetically, scientifically. That somewhere buried deep inside your DNA is a signature left behind by a species of people that no one even knew existed until very recently. A ghost, a shadow, a third kind of human being that walked this earth, lived alongside our ancestors, had children with them, and then vanished. And today, millions of people across Asia are still carrying pieces of that ancient ghost inside them. This is not a theory. This is not speculation. This is what scientists discovered when they started digging into the DNA of modern humans across Asia. And what they found shook the entire field of human evolution to its core. We all learned in school that the story of humanity was relatively simple. Homo sapiens evolved in Africa, spread across the world, and eventually became the only humans left standing. The Neanderthals died out. The other ancient relatives died out. We won. End of story. But the more scientists looked at DNA, real, raw, ancient genetic data, the more that clean story started falling apart. First came the Neanderthals. We knew they existed. We found their bones, their tools, their skulls. But in 2010, scientists from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology published something extraordinary. By analyzing ancient Neanderthal DNA and comparing it to modern humans, they found that people of non-African descent carry somewhere between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA in their genomes. Our ancestors didn't just encounter Neanderthals. They had children with them. The genetic legacy of that encounter is still inside billions of people alive today. That was already mind-bending. But it was only the beginning, because that same year, in that same lab, a different discovery was made, one that completely rewrote what we thought we knew about human diversity. Scientists were analyzing an ancient finger bone found in a cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, in a place called Denisova Cave. They expected to find either Neanderthal or early modern human DNA. What they found instead was neither. It was something completely new. A different branch of the human family tree that no one had ever identified before. They called them the Denisovans. And here's where it gets truly remarkable. Unlike Neanderthals, we have almost no fossil remains of the Denisovans. We're talking about fragments, a finger bone, a few teeth, part of a jaw found in Tibet. That's essentially it. And yet, from those tiny fragments, scientists were able to extract DNA, sequence it, and compare it to the genomes of modern humans around the world. And what they found changed everything. People across Asia, particularly in Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea, Australia, and the Pacific Islands, carry measurable amounts of Denisovan DNA. In some populations in Melanesia, that figure reaches up to 6%. 6% of their genome traces back to an entirely unknown species of human. A species we discovered not through bones, not through archaeology, but through genetics alone. But here's the part that the headlines often miss. Scientists didn't find just one wave of Denisovan ancestry in modern humans. They found at least 2, and possibly 3, distinct populations of Denisovans that interbred with different groups of ancient modern humans at different times and in different places, which means the Denisovans weren't just one group of people hanging out in one cave. They were a widespread, diverse population that ranged across enormous stretches of Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. And now, scientists believe there may be an entirely third type of archaic human buried in the DNA of some Asian populations. One that doesn't match Neanderthals, doesn't match Denisovans, and doesn't match anything we've previously identified. A ghost population. A group of ancient people who lived, breathed, had families, and then disappeared, leaving only the faintest traces of themselves inside the genomes of their descendants. Let's slow down and really understand what we're talking about here, because the science is genuinely extraordinary and the implications are profound. When geneticists analyze human DNA from populations across Asia, they look for segments, chunks of the genome, that appear unusual. Segments that seem to have come from a different source, that don't fit the pattern of what we expect to see in modern Homo sapiens. These segments are sometimes called archaic introgression, meaning DNA that was introduced into the modern human gene pool through interbreeding with archaic or ancient humans. We already know about the Neanderthal introgression. We know about the Denisovan introgression. But when scientists look at the DNA of certain populations, particularly groups in South and Southeast Asia, they find segments of archaic DNA that can't be explained by either Neanderthal or Denisovan ancestry alone. The statistical pattern suggests something else. A third source, an unknown population that interbred with the ancestors of these groups at some point in deep prehistory. Researchers have described this hypothetical population using different terms. Some call it a super-archaic human, some describe it as an unknown archaic hominin. But the point is the same. There's a genetic signal in living people today that we can't attribute to any group we currently know about, which means there was at least one more species, or highly distinct population, of human beings out there in ancient Asia that has left no known fossil record, but has left a biological legacy inside millions of living people. Think about what that means for a second. We are discovering entire branches of the human family tree, not by digging in the dirt, but by reading the genomes of people alive today. The genetic record is, in many ways, more complete than the fossil record. Bones decay. DNA, under the right conditions, can last for hundreds of thousands of years. And every person walking the earth today is a living archive of human prehistory. Now, who exactly were the Denisovans? What do we actually know about them beyond their DNA? The truth is, we know remarkably little about what they looked like, how they lived, or what their culture was like. The fossil evidence is almost non-existent. What we do have are the genetic data and a few physical artifacts associated with the cave where the first specimens were found. There's evidence that whoever used Denisova cave had sophisticated tools, ornaments made from animal teeth, a bracelet made from polished green stone. These suggest a level of cognitive and cultural development that we might have previously assumed only modern humans were capable of. The Tibetan jaw fragment, found in 1980 but not identified as Denisovan until 2019 through protein analysis, tells us that at least some Denisovans were adapted to high-altitude environments. In fact, this has real implications for people alive today. The Tibetan people, who live at altitudes that would cause serious health problems for most humans, carry a gene variant called EPIS1 that helps them process oxygen more efficiently at high elevation. And this variant, it came from the Denisovans. Modern Tibetans inherited this crucial adaptation from an ancient introgression event that happened tens of thousands of years ago. The Denisovans gave the Tibetans the ability to live on the roof of the world. This is one of the most powerful examples of how archaic introgression wasn't just a genetic curiosity. It was biologically significant. When modern humans encountered and interbred with Denisovans, they sometimes acquired genetic variants that helped them survive in new environments. The Denisovan DNA wasn't just along for the ride. In some cases, it was actively beneficial. It was selected for because it gave people an advantage. We see something similar with Neanderthal DNA. Certain Neanderthal gene variants are associated with stronger immune responses to specific pathogens, viruses and bacteria that were present in Eurasia, but that African populations of Homo sapiens hadn't previously encountered. When our ancestors moved into Neanderthal territory, they were stepping into an environment filled with unfamiliar diseases. By interbreeding and picking up some Neanderthal immunity-related genes, they were better equipped to survive. So the story of archaic introgression isn't just about sex and genetics. It's about adaptation. It's about how Homo sapiens became so extraordinarily successful at colonizing every corner of the planet, in part because they absorbed genetic knowledge from the people who were already there. But let's go back to Asia, because that's where the story gets even more layered and complex. The current picture that scientists have pieced together goes something like this. Modern humans began moving out of Africa in multiple waves, starting roughly 60,000 to 80,000 years ago, though some evidence suggests earlier dispersals as well. As they moved into the Middle East, then through South Asia, then into East and Southeast Asia, they encountered populations of archaic humans who had been living in these regions for hundreds of thousands of years. These encounters weren't always peaceful, but they weren't always violent either. Sometimes they resulted in interbreeding. In the western part of this expansion, modern humans met Neanderthals. In the eastern part, they met Denisovans, but the picture wasn't clean and binary. The Denisovans themselves appeared to have been highly genetically diverse, representing multiple distinct populations that had been separated from each other for very long periods. When scientists look at Denisovan DNA found in different modern populations, they can tell that different groups of modern humans interbred with different Denisovan populations at different times. For example, the Denisovan ancestry found in East Asians appears to come from a different Denisovan population than the Denisovan ancestry found in Papuans and Aboriginal Australians. These two groups of modern humans met different Denisovan, and there may have been a third distinct Denisovan group that contributed to yet another pattern of ancestry we see in modern South Asian populations. On top of all of that, there's the additional unknown signal, the genetic traces that can't be attributed to any known archaic group. Some researchers believe this could represent an even more ancient lineage, something that branched off from the main human family tree much earlier than Neanderthals or Denisovans, a truly ancient ghost. One hypothesis involves a group sometimes called the super-archaic humans, a lineage that may have diverged from the rest of the human family tree over 1 million years ago. If such a group existed and interbred with the ancestors of modern Asian populations, even once, even rarely, they could have left traces that we're still detecting today in the genomes of living people. Traces that look different from Neanderthal or Denisovan DNA because they are different. This might sound like speculation, but it's grounded in real statistical analysis of real genomic data. Scientists use sophisticated computational models to analyze modern genomes and look for signals that suggest different types of archaic ancestry. When those models consistently point to an ancestry source that can't be explained by what we already know, that's significant. That's science telling us there's something here we haven't found yet. What's fascinating is the geographic distribution of these signals. The populations that seem to carry the strongest evidence for this unknown third archaic ancestry are concentrated in South and Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, the Malay Peninsula, the island chains of Southeast Asia. These regions are geographically complex, with diverse environments that would have supported many different populations for long periods of time. They were also key crossroads for human migration, the routes that populations took as they moved from Africa through South Asia, and then fanned out into East Asia and the Pacific. And here's a crucial point that often gets lost in the popular coverage of these discoveries. When we talk about archaic introgression, we're not talking about something that happened to someone else. We're not talking about a distant branch of humanity that has no connection to people alive today. We're talking about genetic variants that are present right now in the bodies of millions of living human beings. In some cases, those variants may have no significant effect. They might be neutral, just sitting there in the genome, neither helping nor hurting. In other cases, they may be actively influencing the health and biology of the people who carry them. There's growing research interest in understanding which archaic gene variants are functional, what they do, and how they might affect things like disease, susceptibility, immune function, metabolism, and other biological traits. The idea that people in Asia today might be carrying functional genetic contributions from a species that we haven't even fully identified yet is, to put it mildly, extraordinary. It means that the biological diversity of living humans is partially a product of evolutionary events involving species and populations that we don't fully understand. It means our genome is, in a sense, a patchwork, a mosaic of contributions from different ancient lineages, stitched together over hundreds of thousands of years of migration and interbreeding. Now, it's important to address some questions that naturally come up when people hear about this research. First, does this mean some people are more archaic than others? Absolutely not. All modern human populations have mixed ancestries. All modern humans are equally modern. The populations that carry Denisovan ancestry are not less evolved or more primitive. That framing is not just wrong, it's scientifically meaningless. Evolution doesn't have a direction toward more modern. What we're talking about is the specific history of different populations, who their ancestors met, where and when. Second, how much does this matter practically? In some cases, quite a bit. The Tibetan high-altitude adaptation is a real significant example of archaic introgression affecting human health and survival. There are other examples too. Certain Denisovan-derived gene variants appear to affect immune function. Some Neanderthal-derived variants are associated with differences in pain sensitivity, cholesterol levels, blood clotting, and even some neurological traits. These aren't huge effects, but they're real. And as genomic research becomes more sophisticated, we're likely to discover more functional archaic variants. Third, how do scientists actually find this stuff? The techniques involved are genuinely impressive. Researchers compare modern genomes to ancient genomes, including sequenced DNA from Neanderthal and Denisovan specimens, and look for matching segments. They also use statistical methods to detect archaic signals even when they don't have a reference genome to compare to. If a segment of DNA looks very different from what you'd expect based on normal human genetic variation, and if its pattern of variation suggests it hasn't been evolving alongside modern human DNA for the same length of time, that's a signal that it may have come from elsewhere, from an archaic introgression. The field has advanced enormously over the past decade. The first Neanderthal genome was sequenced in 2010. Since then, we've sequenced many ancient human genomes from different time periods and locations. We've developed computational tools that can analyze enormous datasets and detect subtle signals of ancestry. And we keep finding things we didn't expect. In 2021, a study published in the journal Nature Genetics identified what the authors described as a potentially novel archaic introgression in modern human populations in South and Southeast Asia. Signals that couldn't be attributed to known archaic groups. This wasn't a fringe study in a minor publication. This was mainstream, peer-reviewed science in one of the world's most prestigious journals. The finding added serious weight to the hypothesis that there's at least one more unknown archaic group out there, hiding in the genomes of living humans. And the pace of discovery is accelerating. Ancient DNA technology is improving rapidly. We're able to extract and sequence DNA from older and older specimens from harsher and harsher conditions. Researchers are sequencing ancient genomes from across Asia, and every new dataset potentially contains new discoveries. It's entirely possible, likely even, that within the next decade we will identify new archaic human populations purely from their genetic traces in modern people, and then go looking for their physical remains. This is a genuinely new kind of paleontology. Instead of starting with a fossil and trying to understand the creature, we're starting with a genetic signal in living people and trying to find the creature. The genome of modern humans is becoming a map of ancient human diversity, a map that's pointing us toward discoveries we haven't made yet. But what does all of this mean at a deeper level? What is the philosophical and cultural significance of realizing that the human family tree is far more tangled, far more complex, far more interconnected than we ever imagined? For a very long time, the dominant narrative in popular culture, and even in much of science, was one of replacement. Modern humans came out of Africa, spread across the world, and replaced everyone they encountered. The Neanderthals died out because they couldn't compete. The other ancient humans disappeared. Homo sapiens was simply better, more intelligent, more adaptable, more human. But the genetic evidence tells a different story, a more complicated and arguably more beautiful story. The modern humans who left Africa didn't simply replace the people they encountered. They mingled with them. They interacted with them in ways that resulted in children. Those children carried genetic contributions from multiple ancestries. And those contributions were passed down through the generations, sometimes persisting for tens of thousands of years, sometimes spreading because they were beneficial, sometimes just drifting along as neutral variants in an expanding population. The human species, our species, is not a pure lineage. It never was. We are a composite. We are the product of ancient encounters between different kinds of people in different parts of the world across enormous spans of time. The boundaries between species that we draw in textbooks are, in some ways, arbitrary, or at least more blurred than they appear. Because if species don't interbreed successfully, they don't leave genetic traces in each other's descendants. The very existence of Neanderthal DNA and Denisovan DNA in modern humans tells us that, whatever the differences between us and them, we were close enough to have children together. Children who lived and grew up and had their own children and eventually became our ancestors. That's not a trivial thing. That's a fundamental revision of what it means to be human. And then there's the third group, the ghost, the unknown. Whatever it was that left its traces in the DNA of people living in Asia today. That unknown archaic lineage that we haven't yet named, haven't yet found, haven't yet understood. It's out there in the genetic record, waiting to be discovered, waiting for us to find the right fossil, the right ancient DNA sample, the right piece of bone from the right layer of rock. Or maybe we'll never find physical evidence. Maybe the only record this unknown population left is molecular, buried in the genomes of their descendants, carried forward through millions of generations to the present day. Maybe the evidence that they existed will always be genetic, not archaeological. And that might have to be enough. Because in some ways, it's more than enough. It's extraordinary that we can detect the existence of an unknown population trace the biological contributions they made to living people, and study those contributions, all without ever having found a single piece of their physical remains. The story of human origins is not finished. It's not even close to finished. Every new ancient genome that's sequenced, every new modern population that's analyzed, potentially adds new chapters. The picture that's emerging is one of astonishing complexity, a web of populations migrating, meeting, mixing, diverging, mixing again, stretching back not tens of thousands of years, but hundreds of thousands of years. We are the living product of that entire web. Every person alive today is, in some sense, an archive of that history. Think about the person sitting next to you on the subway, or across from you at the dinner table, or anywhere else in the world. They carry inside them genetic echoes of ancient encounters in Siberia, in the jungles of Southeast Asia, on the high Tibetan plateau. They carry contributions from people whose names we will never know, whose faces we can only vaguely imagine, whose languages and cultures and beliefs are entirely lost to time, but who existed, who loved and struggled and survived, and who, in the most literal sense possible, live on inside us. That is what science is telling us right now. Not in science fiction, not in mythology, in peer-reviewed journals, in genetic databases, in the painstaking work of researchers who sequence ancient DNA and write computational algorithms and compare millions of base pairs of genetic code. We're still in the early chapters of figuring it out. The ancient ghost hidden in Asian DNA isn't just a fascinating scientific curiosity. It's a reminder that the world our ancestors inhabited was far more populated, far more diverse, and far more interconnected than we imagine. It's a reminder that the clean categories we use to organize the past, species, subspecies, populations, races, break down when you look closely enough at the actual biology. It's a reminder that humanity, in its deepest sense, has always been plural, always been a story of encounter and exchange, always been bigger than any one group, any one lineage, any one narrative. We are not just Homo sapiens. We are, in small but measurable ways, also Neanderthal, also Denisovan, also something else, something we don't yet have a name for. And millions of people alive today, walking through their lives, going about their days, carry inside them the genetic legacy of that something else. A third kind of human, hidden in their DNA, waiting to be understood. If this kind of deep dive into science and human origins is something you want more of, then hit that subscribe button right now. Every week we go deep into the stories that science is telling us about who we are, where we came from, and what it means to be human. And leave a comment below. I want to know, does knowing that millions of people carry DNA from an unknown ancient human change how you think about human diversity? Does it make you curious about your own ancestry? Tell me in the comments. And if you found this video genuinely mind-expanding, share it with someone who loves this kind of thing, because this is the kind of story that deserves to be heard.